Nobody wants to say it out loud. Estate agents won't say it. The banks definitely won't say it. The government is hoping you don't notice. But right now, across 12 specific towns in the United Kingdom, something is happening beneath the surface of the property market that is going to blindside hundreds of thousands of homeowners who think they are sitting safely on their biggest financial asset. These are not struggling post-industrial ghost towns nobody has heard of. These are places people actively chose, places people stretched their budgets for, places people were told were safe bets. And right now, in every single one of them, the value of property is going in one direction only, and it is not up. I want to be very clear about something before we start. This is not doom-mongering for clicks. The numbers I am about to walk you through are real, they are current, and they matter to your financial future more than almost anything else happening in this country right now. If you own property in any of these 12 towns, you need to stop, sit down, and actually listen. Let's go through them one by one, starting at number 12 and working our way to the most alarming situation of all. Number 12. Watford. Let's start here, because Watford tells you everything you need to understand about how this whole collapse began. During the pandemic years, Watford became a symbol of the great London exodus. People were flooding out of the capital, chasing space, chasing gardens, chasing what felt like value. Watford had the train line, Watford had the retail, Watford had just enough distance from London to feel like an escape without cutting the cord entirely. Prices surged, demand felt endless. Then it stopped. Not gradually, it stopped. Average prices have now dropped to £391,000, a fall of 3.3% in just 12 months. That is more than £12,000 of value gone from the average home in a single year. And the really alarming detail that estate agents quietly mention when you push them? Properties are sitting on the market for 62 days on average. 2 months. In a functioning market, good properties in commuter towns move fast. When they are sitting for 2 months, it tells you that buyers have done the maths, looked at mortgage rates, looked at their salaries, and decided the price is simply not right. Watford are going to face a painful choice very soon. Drop the price significantly or wait even longer. Number 11. The Isle of Wight. I want to be honest with you here because the Isle of Wight story is not just sad. It is genuinely alarming if you are a property investor holding assets there. Prices have fallen 4.3% year on year, bringing the average down to around £242. Zero. That sounds almost manageable until you understand the other half of the story. Private rents on the island have jumped 8.2% in the same period. You might think rising rents are good news for landlords. They are not. Not here. Not when your asset is depreciating, your mortgage costs have exploded upward, and the rental yield still does not cover your borrowing costs, even with rents rising sharply. The island's defining quality, its isolation, was briefly fashionable during lockdowns. That fashionability has completely evaporated. Younger people are leaving. The seasonal economy that underpins local employment is struggling. Property investors who genuinely believed they were buying into something resilient and tourism-proof are discovering that belief was built on very shaky foundations. The smart money started moving out quietly months ago. Number 10. Hastings. There was a moment, not so long ago, when Hastings was being written about in lifestyle supplements as the next big thing. The affordable coastal town, the artist community, the character, the potential. Investors read those articles and they bought. Prices climbed, short-term rental listings multiplied. Everyone congratulated themselves on their early mover advantage. And then the reality arrived. Prices have now fallen 3.8% in 12 months, with the average sitting around £241, zero, almost £10,000 per property, wiped out in a year. But the deeper issue in Hastings is not the price movement. It is the complete evaporation of the story that justified those prices in the first place. The trendy coastal escape narrative collapsed when it became clear that the underlying economic fundamentals of the town had not actually changed. You cannot create a thriving property market through lifestyle journalism alone. Sellers are now repeatedly cutting asking prices. Buyers are scarce, cautious, and they have the upper hand completely for the first time in years. Number 9. Torquay, the English Riviera. The name alone was doing a lot of heavy lifting for a very long time. Torquay attracted buyers during the pandemic who fell in love with the photographs, fell in love with the idea, and perhaps spent a little too much time on holiday there before making financial decisions they are now reconsidering seriously. The headline price fall of 1.9% sounds modest. The real indicator of distress is this: over 40% of properties in Turkey are sitting on the market for more than 6 months. 6 months. In any healthy property market, that figure should be a tiny fraction of listings. When nearly half of all available properties cannot find a buyer in half a year, that is not a market experiencing a minor adjustment. That is a market experiencing something much more serious. Turkey's problem is structural. The properties are beautiful and expensive to maintain. Leasehold complications abound. The population skews older. Remote workers who briefly made this lifestyle work are being pulled back towards cities. The buyers needed to absorb current supply simply do not exist in the numbers required. Number 8. Canterbury. Medieval streets, cathedral spires, university energy. Canterbury has always sold itself on character, and for years that character commanded a premium. The town attracted buyers who wanted somewhere distinctive, somewhere with history and culture, somewhere that felt worth the money. That premium is now being systematically dismantled. Nearly 1 in 5 properties in Canterbury has seen a significant price reduction recently. 1 in 5. Think about what that actually means in practice. Sellers put their homes on the market with confidence, received silence or disappointment, and then had to publicly acknowledge they got the number wrong. That is a humbling and financially painful experience. And it is happening across Canterbury at a scale that should alarm anyone holding property there. The commute to London was always the compromise. Higher mortgage rates turned that compromise into an impossible calculation. Local incomes cannot support these prices. The market is recalibrating to reflect that reality, and recalibration is a polite word for what is actually happening to people's equity. Number 7. Torbay. Encompassing Torquay, Paynton and Brixham together as a local authority, Torbay has recorded a 2% price fall with averages around £232, £5,000 per property gone. The tourism brochures still look gorgeous. The sunsets still happen. None of that changes the fundamental economic reality facing property owners in this area. The buyers who flooded into Torbay during the pandemic years were disproportionately retirees and remote workers seeking a lifestyle upgrade. That pool of buyers is now exhausted. The retirees who wanted to move here have largely done so. The remote workers discovered that living 200 miles from their professional networks created its own set of problems. And crucially, the younger buyers needed to sustain any long-term property market. The first-time buyers, the young families, are simply not here in meaningful numbers. Without demographic renewal, property markets stagnate and then decline. Torbay is living that reality right now. Number 6. Bournemouth and Poole. This stretch of Dorset coastline was supposed to be the premium version of the South Coast lifestyle. Bournemouth has a genuine identity, a proper town centre, better infrastructure than many of its coastal neighbours. And yet prices have fallen 1.8%, with over 40% of stock sitting unsold for more than 6 months. The Airbnb dream that lured so many investors to this market has turned into a quiet nightmare. Margins have collapsed. Competition is fierce. European alternatives are cheaper and more appealing to the tourists this market depended upon. The rental yield story has completely unraveled. Meanwhile, the demographic reality is stark. Bournemouth's population skews retired. Older residents are aging in place rather than moving. And the younger population that might drive demand upward is not arriving. You cannot have a dynamic property market without a dynamic population. Bournemouth and Poole are discovering this truth at significant financial cost right now. Number 5. High Wycombe. This is where the numbers start to become genuinely shocking. Prices in High Wycombe fell 7.4% in a single year, from £471,000 down to £436. That is £35,000 per property destroyed in 12 months. £35,000. For years, High Wycombe was sold to buyers as the affordable London alternative. Close enough to commute, far enough to be cheaper. It worked when mortgage rates were low and when the gap between London prices and Wycombe prices felt worth the train journey. That calculation has been completely demolished by higher borrowing costs. At mortgage rates above 6%, a £436,000 home is not affordable for most people earning local Wickham salaries. First-time buyers cannot get near it. Existing owners who stretched for it in 2021 and 2022 are now watching equity disappear monthly. Sellers who need to move are discovering the brutal gap between what they hope to get and what buyers will actually pay. Number 4. Crawley. If High Wycombe shocked you, Crawley is going to stop you completely. An 8.9% price fall in 12 months, down from roughly £408,000 to £372, £36,000 per property gone in a single year. Crawley is a purpose-built town. It was designed to function as a jobs-led community, and for decades it did exactly that. Gatwick Airport was the engine. When that engine stuttered badly during the pandemic, and the recovery proved slower and more incomplete than anyone predicted, the knock-on effect to the housing market was severe and direct. Buy-to-let investors who piled into Crawley betting on airport-adjacent demand are now selling into a falling market and cutting losses that were not supposed to exist. Supply is building. Demand has gone. The mathematics of this market are not difficult to understand. They are just very unpleasant to confront if you own property here. Number 3. Reading. Reading feels different to the other towns on this list because the price fall is a relatively modest 0.7%. Reading is not in freefall. Reading is something potentially more dangerous. Reading is at the top of a slope, and the warning signs of what comes next are clearly visible for anyone willing to look. Days on market are climbing. Price reductions are normalizing. The buy-to-let community, which drove enormous demand in Reading for years, is retreating rapidly. Landlords facing higher taxes, higher maintenance costs, and stagnant rents are selling up and exiting. Every one of those landlord sales adds inventory to a market where buyer demand is already softening. Reading property owners who are waiting for things to quietly recover should ask themselves seriously, what is the catalyst for that recovery? Mortgage rates staying high. Landlord exodus continuing. Buyer confidence fragile. Reading could tip much harder before it finds a floor. Number 2. London. Let me be precise about London because the capital's situation is both more complicated and more alarming than people are currently acknowledging. 7 consecutive months of annual price declines. A 3.3% fall overall with average prices at £554. £18,000 lost per property on average. But averages are dangerously misleading in London. Westminster is down. Kensington and Chelsea are down over 11%. 11% in 1 year. For someone holding a £2 million flat in Kensington, that is a loss that runs well into 6 figures. The structural forces driving London's decline are not temporary inconveniences. High earners and international buyers have dispersed. Remote work made the city optional for a significant cohort. Tax changes made investment property economically unattractive. New build towers that developers sold to investors are now being sold by those same investors at losses. Flat prices across the city are under sustained and serious pressure. Anyone holding London property and assuming the market will bounce back because it always has should spend some time studying which previous London corrections took 5 years to recover and which took a decade. Number 1. Slough. Every list needs its number 1. And I want to be honest with you. Slough did not end up at the top of this list because it is the most dramatic single-year fall. It is here because of what Slough represents and where Slough is heading. The town sits at the intersection of every structural problem, battering the south of England property market simultaneously. Days on market have jumped 18% in a single year. Price cuts are not occasional. They are standard practice. Inventory is accumulating with no buyers prepared to absorb it. The economic base of logistics, distribution, and light manufacturing that built Slough's property market is under existential pressure from automation. These are not jobs coming back. These are jobs leaving and not being replaced. When you layer that on top of the already toxic combination of high mortgage rates, collapsed buyer confidence, and a broader southern England market in serious difficulty, Slough becomes a case study in what happens when multiple negative forces converge on a single market at once. If you own property in Slough and you are hoping that patience will be rewarded, you need to seriously examine whether the fundamentals support that hope. They do not obviously do so right now, so there you have it. 12 towns, 12 different stories. But underneath every single one of them, the same forces are at work. Affordability stretched beyond its breaking point. Interest rates at levels that make the numbers stop working. Pandemic-era demand that evaporated when the pandemic ended. A wave of investor and landlord selling that is flooding markets with supply, just as genuine buyer demand has gone quiet. The mainstream narrative tells you the UK property market is finding its footing and stabilising gently. What the data in these 12 towns tells you is something much more uncomfortable. The correction is real, it is ongoing, and for owners in the south of England in particular, the next 12 to 18 months may well determine the financial outcomes of the next decade. If you are holding property in any of these places, the most dangerous thing you can do right now is nothing. Assumptions that served the market well for 20 years are not serving it anymore. The map has changed. The question is whether you are going to update your understanding of it before it is too late.